Yo, what's up? Back again, trying to get 2 degrees buffer. And I'm gonna tell you this, a lot of things I notice when it comes to spirituality and the Bible is a lot of things are taken out of context. Context is key. If you haven't heard me say this in a previous video, you're gonna continue to hear me say this. I'm gonna come back to it again and again and again. And the reason it's so important is because, by the way, like, subscribe, share, you know how we roll, you know how we get down. The reason it's important is because I can't take something out of the Bible and just plug and play. I can't just cut and paste it from Bible times into my time, totally devoid of any of the context and the meaning that it had to the people at that time. All right? An example would be where, let's say Jesus is saying something in the form of a parable, and there's an illustration. We have to understand that whatever it was that Jesus was saying to the people then and there at that time, if he was talking about fishing, farming, I'm not a fisherman, I'm not a farmer. So it's not going to mean the same thing to me as the parable did to those people who were fishermen and who were farmers. They understood the point in a specific way, and that's what made it mean more to them. All right. It wasn't just a story. It was something that they could relate to, something that they would experience differently based on their life experience. I'll give you another example. Within Christianity, there's a branch of Adventists, of which I am one, and we believe that Ellen White was a prophet. Now, she had a lot of things to say, and a lot of books more recently of hers are actually compilation books where it's quotes of letters, different things that she said to different people specifically who were asking for her help, her influence and guidance. And we've made these compilation books that take the statement, and now we look at that statement today and say, oh, okay, this is advice for me here and now. Without having any idea who she was talking to, without having any idea the context of the situation that caused her to say that, without having any idea what the request was for the inspiration or the guidance, we take all of that out of the picture and just take the statement and drag and drop it into my life and act like, okay, this is exactly what I need to do, as if it was spoken just to me. I've heard people say this before, look at the Bible as a love letter written to you, right? Read it as if it was written to you. And you can do that to a degree, but again, I was not a shepherd, I was not a fisherman, I'm not a farmer, I'm not a soldier. I'm not any of these things. I'm not somebody who was in slavery for 400 years in Egypt. Like, I'm not any of these things or any of these people that were receiving very specific messages with a very particular understanding. All right? Going back to Ellen White, this is an area that I'm really passionate about, this thing about context. So I probably will end up going all over the place as I talk about this thing. But back to Ellen White. She has a couple statements that everybody glosses over when it comes to context, even though they want to do everything else. So let me give you the quote, and you'll see what I'm saying. She has a statement that basically says you shouldn't own a bicycle because, the statement says you shouldn't own a bicycle. All right. The principle in the context is that in that time, bicycles were very expensive. And if you were putting a lot of money into this area, it probably meant that you were getting caught up in the fad of what everyone else was doing, spending money to keep up with the Joneses. And you might not have been being the best steward of your money and your resource. That's the principle. And yet people will look at that and say, well, you shouldn't own a bike because Ellen White said you shouldn't own a bike. She wasn't saying you shouldn't own a bicycle. She was saying be financially responsible. That is the principle that we get from the context of what she said in the time that she said it. And that's what means something to us now. That's the piece that we take from the statement contextually that means something to us here and now. Another example, she said, don't go to the movie theaters. And so Adventists and Christians are very quick to say, don't go to the movie theaters because that's what Ellen White said. Well, what's the context? What did she say, or what was the experience of the movie theater back in her time? Well, there was a lot more things going on than just watching something on a screen. If you want to go back and see how crazy it was, prostitutes. Often those kinds of exchanges happen. Escorts, all that stuff happened in theaters. Like, there were a lot of different things going on in the theater that made it a place that she said a Christian probably shouldn't be. Okay? I'll give you another one. A lot of people want to talk about vegetarianism, and Ellen White is very well known for her influence on the health message that Adventists propose, and it's a very good message, but I think sometimes it gets taken too far. So much so to the point where people say, well, if you're not vegan or vegetarian, you're not going to be saved. Where's the context? A lot of people forget that Ellen White herself ate meat for a long portion of her life, even after making some of these statements. So they take out the context really quickly and ignore everything that was happening in the time, and even the experience of the person who's saying it, and they miss out on the principle. The principle being, you should make the best choices that you can based on you, and it's different for everyone. And this is not a barrier to entry when it comes to whether or not God will accept you. This is crazy. I even had somebody in one of my classes. This is in, I think this was during the master's degree. Yeah, I think this was during the master's degree still. Somebody was arguing that Jesus was a vegan. Can you imagine? This is the same guy who was working with these fishermen to continue to collect fish because that's what their method was for life. They didn't just sell them because fish was a currency, all right? That was what they ate. That's what they consumed. We know this. We know this contextually speaking. This is the same guy who, near the end of the Gospels, and after he's already been resurrected from the dead, he's on the beach with Peter, and they catch the fish, and he's there. They come up upon him on the beach, and he's there cooking the fish over a fire on the beach there. What do you think he's doing that for? Just because fish was best fuel for fire? No, because that was breakfast. And we literally got these people trying to take these statements from somebody within the last 150 years and trying to rewrite the entirety of Scripture to make it fit their need. Context is key. Context is key. If there's ever, and there are a lot of areas I think that this is important, but if there was ever an area that people would want to know some kind of spiritual guidance and have context be very applicable to the situation, I think it would be relationships. The area of relationships. People have questions about relationships all the time. People are looking for advice and guidance in the area of relationships all the time, and that's never going to stop because it's going to continue being a very big part of our existence. Now, when you think of things like the red pill movement and the response to that, what do they call it? Misogyny and misandry, or whatever these terms are. I'm not really sure. But you have everybody out there who's trying to give you their 2 cents and their advice on these things. And there's a market for it because the questions are there. Everybody wants to know, how do you go about this thing? How do you do it? Especially in a world that's becoming more and more technological, where the majority of your interactions sometimes are digital instead of actually in person. Point is, if you wanted some contextual advice or guidance on something from a spiritual context, relationships is one of these areas that a lot of people are looking for it in. But the reason I bring this up is because I think it can be very easy to take verses from the Bible that are talking about something else completely contextually and drag and drop it into my relationship and understanding it today and say that this is what this is saying about how I should proceed or not proceed in terms of this relationship. All of this to say, me and a friend of mine, we decided to use the Bible app to study this this devotional plan called 21 Days of Rightful Relationships. Make sure I got this thing right. 21 Days of Rightful Relationships. And for me personally, I think there were a few things that I was able to get from this experience over the 3 weeks that we went through it. However, I think that a lot of the verses that were used here came out of left field in terms of contextual application. That is to say, I don't think that they applied to the situation of relationships at all. I think it was a drag and drop thing that was going on. But also, I think what makes it more interesting is that, and you'll see, I'm going to go through each one of the days of this, what was actually mentioned in the devotional and the verses, make my observations on it, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you what you think about it, whether or not I'm tripping or whether or not you agree. Let me know what you think about this. But the overarching impression that I got generally from the entire devotional experience was actually more of a negative one. So you combine this aspect of relationships that everyone is trying to learn more, and they want to make sure that they're doing the right thing and making good decisions in. I mean, people say all the time, the two biggest decisions you'll make in your life are what you're going to do in terms of spirituality and who you're going to marry. Your career is up there with them. But, you know, it's one of the biggest things you'll ever do in life is your interaction or your relationship with somebody down the line. But if I'm looking at something that is primarily negative and skeptical, maybe that's a better word, it had a very skeptical view of relationships from my perspective, and then I'm taking verses out of context to prove my point, I don't think that puts people in the best position to make the best decisions contextually within relationships. So we're going to be going through this thing, 21 days, 21 videos, and I'll let you know what I think. And again, I'm looking forward to hearing what you think about this thing. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see when we get there. But anyways, I'll catch you in the next one. Stay tuned, like, subscribe, share. You don't want to miss this. I think it'll be very insightful, and hopefully we can get some good points and some decent perspective when it comes to relationship as a result of going through this devotional study and thinking a little bit more critically about it. So yeah, until then, 2 Degrees Buffer, we out here, and I'll catch you. Peace.